The last time Kina saw her father alive, he said, "Protect what's yours, even if the world calls you cruel for it." She thought he meant the land, but after the funeral, when she watched her brother hand her inheritance to his mistress while their mother looked away, she realized her father meant everything. Kina had always been the quiet one in her family. She watched more than she spoke, always noticing things others missed. Her father, Ni Kapakpo, was a respected and wealthy man in their Ghanaian village. He loved Kina deeply and often called her my mirror because she reminded him of himself, both in heart and in strength. While others chased attention, Kina stood in the background, steady and calm. When Ni Kapakpo fell sick, everything changed. The house that was once filled with laughter grew heavy with silence. Relatives who hadn't visited in years suddenly started showing up, pretending to care. But Kina saw through them. She saw the way their eyes lingered on the house, the land, the business documents. They weren't here to help. They were waiting for the end and for what they thought would be their share. Kina never left her father's side. Day and night, she cared for him, wiped his face, fed him, held his hand. One evening, just as the sun dipped low and the room was washed in orange light, her father pulled her close. His voice was weak, but his eyes were sharp. He whispered words she never forgot. "They will try to steal what's yours. Burn the lies with the truth." At first, Kina didn't understand. She thought he meant the land or the business. Maybe he was just afraid of death. But when he passed a few days later and the family started acting strange, moving things around, whispering in corners, Kina remembered his words. They weren't about land. They were a warning about betrayal, about people she trusted, about a truth someone would try to bury. And from that moment, Kina promised herself she wouldn't cry too long. She wouldn't break. She would find the lies and she would burn them with the truth, just like her father said. And deep inside her, something quiet and strong woke up, something even she didn't know she had. The day of her father's funeral was not just filled with grief, it was filled with silence, whispers, and heavy eyes that refused to meet Kina's. As people came to mourn, Kina stood quietly beside the casket, holding back her tears. But even in her pain, she noticed something strange. Her brother Nuhu stood too close to a woman no one really knew. Her name was Adika. She wasn't family, yet she moved like she belonged. And as the funeral prayers ended, Kina caught them whispering together and exchanging glances. Something felt wrong. After the burial, the family gathered in the house. That was when the lawyer came to read the will. Kina expected her father to have left something for both children. He always taught her fairness. But as the lawyer's voice filled the room, Kina's heart began to race. Everything, every piece of land, every house, every business share was left to Nuhu. There was no mention of Kina owning anything. Nothing. The lawyer then handed Kina a small wooden box. That was all. Everyone turned to stare at her, some with pity, others with satisfaction. Kina didn't cry. She just held the box tightly and left the room. Later that night, Kina sat alone in the small corner of the house that no longer felt like home. She opened the box with shaky hands. Inside were old keys tied with red string, a few folded letters, and a photo of her and her father smiling together. Her eyes stung, but she didn't cry. She picked up one of the letters and started to read. It was her father's handwriting. His words were gentle, but full of meaning. "You will know when the time is right," one letter said. "Not everything is kept in plain sight." Her mother walked in at that moment, cold and sharp. She looked down at Kina and said, "You are a woman. You will marry into another name. This house belongs to your brother now." Those words broke something inside Kina. Her mother didn't hug her, didn't comfort her. She just walked away like Kina was a mistake that needed to disappear. That night, Kina didn't sleep. She sat on the floor, reading each letter again and again. Her chest felt heavy, but her mind was clear. Her father hadn't forgotten her. He had left her something, but not the way others expected. The box was not just a box. It was a message, a puzzle, a secret waiting to be found. And deep in her heart, she knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Kina couldn't stop thinking about how happy Madame Essie looked at the funeral when she read the will. Her smile was too wide, too calm, as if she already knew what everyone was going to hear. Most people were still crying, but Madame Essie looked like she was ready for a party. Something about it didn't feel right. Kina remembered her father always being careful with legal matters. he trusted slowly, and Madame Isi had only recently become close to the family. That alone made Kina suspicious. Why would her father, a man so careful, suddenly trust a new lawyer with everything he owned? So, Kina started watching her, not openly, just quietly, the way her father taught her. She began to ask gentle questions to people who worked at the law office. She even found a junior clerk named Kojo, who was kind and nervous and clearly didn't like lying. He let slip that there had been two versions of the will, one that was typed and official, the one that gave everything to Nuhu, and another that was handwritten and older. But no one had seen the old one since Nikpakpo's death. Kina's heart raced. She knew her father kept many of his important things in an old wooden chest in his study. It was the same chest he had used for years, one no one touched after his death. That night, when no one was home, Kina returned to the house. She walked through the halls like a stranger, careful not to make a sound. She knelt before the chest and opened it. At first, there was nothing but old papers, clothes, and notebooks. But when she tapped the bottom, she heard something strange, a hollow sound. Her fingers searched along the wooden panel until she felt a small ridge. With a little pressure, the panel lifted up, and there it was, the original will. It was handwritten, in her father's neat script. It was dated a few months before he died, and unlike the one Madame Essie had read, this one split the property fairly between Kina and Nuhu. In fact, some shares and lands were given only to Kina. Her father hadn't forgotten her. He had remembered everything. She sat there for a long time, just holding the paper. Her hands shook, but not from fear, from power, from truth. She could feel it. This was her father's real voice, the one they tried to silence. But Kina didn't rush. She didn't storm into the room and shout. She folded the will carefully, placed it in her bag, and closed the chest again. Let them laugh a little longer, she thought. Let them believe the lie. The truth was in her hands now, and she wasn't done yet. It didn't take long for things to get worse. Just a few weeks after the funeral, Kina heard something that made her heart sink. Adika, the woman her brother used to sneak around with, had moved into their late father's estate. Not just moved in, but taken over. Kina couldn't believe it. She went to the house one afternoon, hoping it was just a rumor, but what she saw nearly made her drop the bag she was holding. Adika stood at the top of the stairs, wearing one of her mother's old headpieces. She had gold bangles on her arms, ones Kina remembered from childhood, jewelry that belonged to their mother. Her father's photos had been taken down and replaced with Adika's pictures. She walked through the house like she owned it, giving orders to the workers and even calling herself Madam of the House. When Kina stepped into the living room, Nuhu didn't even greet her properly. He sat back with a glass of wine in his hand, looked her up and down, and said, "Guests should knock before entering." Guest. He called her a guest in the house she grew up in the home her father built with love. Kina didn't argue. She just turned and left. That night, Kina sat alone in her small apartment, the one she'd been forced to rent after being pushed out. She placed the real will on the table in front of her. Her fingers touched the paper like it was a piece of her father's heart. Her eyes were tired, but her mind was wide awake. They had taken everything from her, her home, her father's name, her place in the family. And now, Adika was wearing her mother's things and sleeping in her father's bed. Kina's hands trembled, not from fear, but from anger, from the fire rising slowly in her chest, from the strength she didn't even know she had until now. She stared at the will for a long time, then whispered to herself, "If they want war, I'll give them one." But not the kind they expected, not shouting in the streets or slaps in the hallway. No, Kina would fight the way her father taught her, with silence, with truth, with documents and signatures that would speak louder than any scream. She would take back what was hers, not by begging, but by proving. And when she was done, no one would ever call her a guest again. That night, something inside her changed. The quiet girl they pushed aside was gone. In her place stood a woman with fire in her eyes, and the truth in her hands. Kina didn't rush. She didn't scream or argue. She remembered what her father always told her. Real strength is quiet. Loud people don't win wars. Smart people do. So, while Nuhu and Adika were busy enjoying the estate, Kina started building her case, quietly, step by step. She went back to the law office where Madame Essie worked, not to confront her, but to learn. She acted calm, polite, even friendly. Over time, she started talking to a young clerk there named Timo. He was new, soft-spoken, and eager to please. Kina brought him lunch one day, and they talked about work. Another day, she helped him fix a problem on his phone. Bit by bit, he began to trust her. One afternoon, Timo told her something she had been hoping to hear. He mentioned some files, financial records, that didn't match the dates on the official will. Kina didn't react. She just smiled and asked if he could show her sometime. He agreed. Later that week, she saw them with her own eyes. Bank statements, hidden payments, large sums moved from one name to another. Some came from her father's accounts and were later traced to Madame Essie and Adika. It was all starting to make sense. But Kina needed more than papers. She needed voices. So, she bought a small recorder. Whenever her brother invited her over, usually to show off, she went, she listened, she smiled, and she recorded. She got everything. Madame Essie joking about how easy it was to switch a few lines, Nuhu bragging about how Kina would never find out, and even Adika saying she felt like a queen already, while Kina moved silently like a shadow. Nuhu did the opposite. He threw big parties in the estate. He invited local leaders and church elders. He spent money like it would never run out. People called him the new chief, the pride of his father's name. They laughed at Kina, called her the forgotten daughter, said she should just get married and stop chasing shadows. But Kina didn't flinch. She didn't need the crowd. She needed the truth. Every night, she laid out her evidence like chess pieces on a board, just like her father used to do when teaching her the game. She would whisper, "Pawn forward, knight takes bishop, checkmate soon." She knew the village would see. One day, everything they thought they knew would collapse in front of them. Kina wasn't planning revenge. She was planning justice. And justice, her father said, doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers and wins. Kina waited for the right moment. She had everything. Proof, recordings, the original will. But she knew this kind of fight needed to be handled the right way. Loud fights cause mess. Silent ones win battle. Her father once told her, "If your words carry fire, let your actions carry ice." There was one man her father had always trusted, a private judge who no longer worked for the courts but still had quiet power. Kina reached out to him through a friend her father had mentioned in one of his letters. After reading the original will and seeing the evidence, the judge didn't ask many questions. He just looked at Kina and said, "Your father raised a lioness." A few weeks later, the case was quietly submitted to the court. No warning, no whisper to Nuhu, no alert to Madame Essie. Then one morning, the courtroom was full. Everyone was called in. Nuhu, Adika, Madame Essie, their lawyer. Even some of the village elders came, thinking it was just a small hearing. But when the judge entered and the documents were laid out, the silence was loud. Kina stood, calm and still, as the judge lifted the real will into the air. Her father's handwriting, his true words, not the one Madame Essie had read, not the version Nuhu had celebrated. Gasps filled the room. Even Adika's proud smile vanished. Madame Essie's hands began to shake. The judge's face was firm as he spoke. "This will is valid and will now replace the fraudulent one. All assets, land, business shares, estate, are hereby frozen until proper transfer is done according to the rightful document." Nuhu tried to speak, but the judge stopped him with a hand. "You will have your time to respond," he said coldly. Kina didn't speak. She simply reached into her folder and pulled out the final piece. Bank receipts, dates, amounts, names. One by one, she handed them to the court clerk. The judge looked through them slowly. He lifted his eyes to Madame Essie. "Can you explain why Adika sent you multiple payments shortly before the first will disappeared?" The room turned to stone. Even the lawyer sitting beside Madame Essie moved slightly away from her. Adika's mouth opened, but no sound came. Madame Essie looked at the floor. Nuhu clenched his fists, realizing what was happening. Kina didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just stood with her head held high, letting the truth speak for her. And in that moment, she understood something deeply. Justice doesn't always need to be shouted through a microphone or fought with fists. Sometimes, justice is quiet. It's a judge's pen, in hitting paper. It's a signature freezing millions. It's a truth that cannot be buried, no matter how deep they tried to hide it. And Kina, she had just started to dig. It didn't take long after the court hearing for everything to fall apart for Madame Essie. Once the truth came out, the real will, the bank records, the bribe money, There was no saving her. The legal board stripped her of her license. She could no longer work as a lawyer. People who once respected her now crossed the street to avoid her. She had lied, stolen, and helped destroy a family's trust. And now it was all catching up to her. Kayna didn't chase her. She didn't shout or threaten. She simply followed the law. One by one, Madame Essie's properties were listed for auction. The judge ordered it so the money could be returned to the rightful owner, Kayna. The same money Adika had sent to Essie. The same money Nuhu had taken from their father's business. Every naira, every cedi, every dollar was now being accounted for. And then came the day that truly shocked everyone. One of the most expensive properties up for auction was Madame Essie's mansion. A big, beautiful house with marble floors, a garden full of roses, and tall, white gates. People in the village used to whisper about how powerful she must be to live there. But that day, they gathered around again, this time to watch the mansion be sold off to the highest bidder. Kina didn't walk in wearing gold or with an army of guards. She came in quietly, holding her father's leather folder and a calm face. When the final bid was called out, Kina raised her hand. No one else dared to compete. The house was sold to the same girl Madame Essie once tried to cheat. Later that week, Kina went to visit her new home. Outside the gate, she saw Madame Essie sitting on a plastic chair. Her expensive clothes were gone. Her eyes were red. Her bags, once full of pride, were now full of panic. Plastic bags held her shoes, some books, and a photo frame that had cracked down the middle. She looked up at Kina, eyes full of pain, maybe even regret. Kina didn't stop. She didn't curse her. She didn't mock her. She simply walked past her, slow and steady, paused for a second at the door and said quietly, "God sees." Then she entered the house, her house now, without looking back. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. Pure, silent justice. The kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. And that day, everyone in the village understood what her father meant when he said, "Burn the lies with the truth." After everything came out, the fake will, the stolen money, the lies, people began to look at Kina differently. The same village that once whispered behind her back now nodded in quiet respect. But not everyone changed. One morning, as Kina was sitting in her new home, reading one of her father's letters, there was a knock on the door. It was her mother. Her mother, who once looked her in the eye and said, "You're just a girl. You will marry and take another name," now stood at the door with swollen eyes and a trembling voice. She wasn't proud. She wasn't strong like before. She was tired, small, and holding on to something that was already broken. Nuhu. They sat in the garden, silent for a while. Then her mother finally spoke. "Please," she whispered. "Please talk to the court. Let Nuhu have back the business, the house, at least something. He is your brother." Kina looked at her, not with hate, but with deep sadness. The same woman who let Adika move into their father's house. The same woman who watched Kina walk out with only a box and said nothing. Now she cried, but not for Kina. She cried for Nuhu. "My son has nothing now," she wept. "People laugh at him. He's ashamed to walk in public." Kina stayed silent for a while. Then she said quietly, "You chose silence when they took everything from me. You stood by while they treated me like I was invisible. I didn't fight out of hate. I fought to survive." Her mother tried to take her hand, but Kina gently pulled away. "This house was once yours," Kina continued, "but you let Adika wear your clothes and sit in your place. You said nothing when they called me a guest. Now you're here, but not for me. You're here because your son is falling." Her mother looked down, her hands shaking. She couldn't deny it. Her tears were real, but they weren't for her daughter. They were for her son's ruined pride. That's when Kina truly understood something. Some wounds don't heal, not fully. They become part of you. You don't forget them. You grow around them. You live, even if it hurts. She stood up slowly, walked her mother to the gate, and said softly, "I forgave you, but I won't forget." And as her mother walked away, still crying, Kina didn't feel victory. She felt something deeper. Strength. Not because she won, but because she didn't break. And that, she realized, was the real inheritance her father left her. The sun was just rising when Kina arrived at the estate. She came quietly, dressed simply, no makeup, no jewelry, just a calm face and steady hands. But behind her were court officers, 2 trucks, and official papers signed and stamped. The judgment had been passed. The estate was hers now. The lies had ended. Adika, of course, refused to leave. For weeks, she had walked around the estate like a queen, still barking orders at the staff, still pretending nothing had changed. She said, "No girl can throw me out, not in this lifetime." But today wasn't like the other days. As the court officers walked through the gates, the village began to gather. People left their stalls, children stopped playing, and neighbours stood frozen, watching. These were the same people who once laughed when Kina was chased away, the same people who said she was finished. Now they were quiet. Adika ran out of the house in her sleeping gown, her hair wild, face twisted with disbelief. "No! You can't do this! This is my home! Where will I go?" she shouted. Kina said nothing. She didn't even blink. Adika rushed to the gates and tried to block the officers. She screamed at them, begged them, cursed them. "This is mine. This is my husband's house. My children live here." The officers didn't answer. They simply did their job. Two of them gently pulled her arms. She broke free. Then they held her tighter. The crowd stood still as Adika clung to the gate with all her strength. Her slippers fell off. Her scarf slipped. Her voice cracked from all the screaming. But it didn't stop what was already written in the law. Her lies had been exposed. Her time was up. Kina stood a few steps back, watching it all. Not with joy, not with anger, just silence. She didn't speak a single word to Adika. She didn't need to. Instead, she slowly turned her head and looked up, at the balcony. The same balcony where her father used to stand and wave at her when she was little. The same place she'd been denied for years. She looked at it quietly and breathed. It felt like her father was there, like he was watching, like he was saying, "You did well, my daughter." As Adika was finally dragged away, still kicking and screaming, Kina didn't look at her again. She just closed her eyes for a second, then stepped through the gates. This time, no one stopped her. No one laughed. No one whispered. The house that once rejected her had opened its doors again, not out of mercy, but out of truth. And in that moment, Kina didn't need applause. She had justice, and she had peace. The estate looks different now, not because it changed, but because Kina did. The broken parts had been repaired, the overgrown garden trimmed back, and the halls no longer echoed with cruelty. But she hadn't reclaimed the property to show off. She hadn't come back to prove anything to anyone. She came back to take back the one thing they all tried to bury, herself. In her study, right beside the window where the morning sun pours in, hangs the original will, framed in dark wood, untouched, unaltered, not because she wanted to show it off, but because it reminded her of truth, of what was stolen, of what she fought for. Kina never held parties at the estate. She never opened a charity or hosted guests to talk about her journey. She didn't want cameras. She didn't want praise. She only wanted peace. Real peace. The kind that didn't need to be shared online. The kind that lives in silence. But still, somehow, her story travelled. The girls in the village whispered it to each other like legend. The one who was thrown out, laughed at, betrayed. The one who was told, "You're just a girl." The one who returned not to seek revenge, but to rise. Sometimes they'd pass by the estate, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. Sometimes they'd see her walking the path by the mango tree, head high, steps quiet. And just seeing her gave them courage. Because Kina didn't shout, she didn't seek applause, but her silence was louder than anything they'd ever heard. And whenever someone brave enough would ask, "How did you survive all that?" Kina would smile, not sadly, not proudly, just softly. And she'd say, "I didn't survive. I transformed." She became someone new, not by forgetting her pain, but by growing around it, like a tree that bends through stone and keeps rising. And sometimes, when the wind blew softly through the old estate, and she stood alone by the balcony where her father used to stand, Kina would close her eyes and hear his voice, not out loud, not like a ghost, but deep inside her heart. And it always said the same thing: "Good girl."